BigCountryPreps.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Capital Farm Credit Wednesday night podcast, our weekly look at the area athletic scene, what happened last week and what's going on this week. I'm here with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom, and welcome back, Dan.
Yeah, it's glad to be back. Obviously, we hope that all of y'all had a really good holiday season, and it's time to start looking ahead. We just wrapped up football season. That's a big part of what we're going to be doing with this podcast is taking a look at our All Big Country Preps football teams, which we just put out on Sunday, which kind of wrapped up the football season for us. And now we'll be pushing ahead into basketball and before long, the spring sports. So things don't stop around here, but it will be good to talk a little bit about those All Big Country Preps teams, which I think you and I are both real proud of.
Very proud of. We had over 300 kids represented in our All Big Country Preps team, which you can look at bigcountrypreps.com. But before we jump into this week's show, we need to thank our primary sponsor, Capital Farm Credit, with offices all over Texas, including Stanford and Abilene. Buy your own slice of Texas with Capital Farm Credit. Together, we're better. All right, and with that, it's time to take a look at our All Big Country Preps football team for 2021. We're going to take a look at our first team roster today and our superlatives. Don't forget, though, we have a second team roster, a third team roster. We have a Rising Stars team, which is something that's a new addition that we've got where we're celebrating the best underclassmen in the big country, some kids to take a look at in the future. And we also have our All Big Country True Grit team, which are the toughest kids all in the big country. We're not going to be taking a look at those. You can look at those at our Big Country Preps website, but we will be going through our first team today and our superlatives. And Dan Youngblood, we will start offensively with our first teamers. Quarterback, no surprise, Ryder Lambert of Stephenville is our starting QB.
Yeah, I mean, this is the only quarterback of an 11-man state championship team, passed for over 4,000 yards, over 50 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions, and also ran for 800 yards, actually more than 800 yards. So a huge season for Ryder in his first season as a quarterback. He was kind of a standout defensive back before that. And this kid's just a junior, so we're going to get to watch him again next year. Obviously, he loses his weapons out wide in Coy Aiken and Reese Elston, but this kid can play. He proved that this year, and it's going to be fun following the rest of his high school career.
All right, now we go to the running back positions. No surprise. How about this for a backfield? We've got Cutter Wilson from Brock. We've got Xavier Wishart from Jim Ned. That would be one heck of a backfield to have behind you.
Yeah, no question. Obviously, Cutter Wilson had over 2,800 yards in helping Brock to a runner-up finish in Class 3A Division I. And then Wishart he was our area's leading rusher for a long time with 2,500 yards and 32 touchdowns. They played 13 games. They actually lost to Brock in the third round of the playoffs. But these two guys, these are guys who have been really good for a long time. Wishart, obviously a state champion himself with that championship his junior season. And then Cutter Wilson darn near picked one up this year. So these two guys, really, really talented kids. And that would be a fun backfield to watch for sure.
Even in their season-ending loss to Brock, in which, Jim Ned was outmanned that day, got beat 70-25. Not a good day. Xavier Wishart still had 4 touchdowns and 159 yards rushing. He was, they were penetrating the line quite a bit. There were people in the backfield all the time, but he still broke loose and got 159 yards rushing against that great Brock defense. So he was really kind of on display that day, even though it wasn't a great day for Jim Ned.
And you could honestly say the same thing about Cutter Wilson as well in their loss to Lorena. They really struggled to move the ball consistently, but he went over 100 yards in that game as well and kind of gave them some big plays in the run game. But these are two kids that are almost impossible to shut down, and those two games, I think, prove that.
All right, now we're going to jump over to receivers and tight ends. And no surprise, we've got Coy Aiken from Stephenville. We've got Harrison Foster of Sweetwater, and we've got Nathan Jones of Brock. In my opinion, that's 3 D1 talents, although Harrison Foster is yet to be discovered yet. Smaller schools are looking at him, but this kid's 6'4", he's 180, he's fast, he's strong. I don't know, somebody's not doing their job. In my opinion, that's 3 D1s we've got at the receiver positions.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it took one of the greatest state championship performances ever for Coy Aiken to finally start getting some of those D1 offers to roll in. And I put Harrison Foster in a similar category. He's another big, tall, athletic receiver that does deserve more attention than he's getting. Had over 1,300 yards receiving, 11 touchdowns, and that was while playing in the defensive backfield for them as well. But when you talk about this group, I think you have to start with Aiken, who had just a remarkable season, over 2,000 yards receiving, 31 touchdown catches. Just incredible. And then you look at what he did in that state championship game, and that's one that I think people will remember for a long, long time.
Yeah, Nathan Jones also. He caught 54 passes, and some people may say, why didn't you throw to him more? Well, you know what? He got a lot of attention. Yeah, he got 54 passes, but I mean, defenses were often geared to stop him as well and making it as tough as possible to throw to him. But he's going to Minnesota, and he's going to fit in quite well in the Big Ten. He's a real talent, good kid too, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. No, he's one that's a super exciting kid looking forward as well. You talk about his ability in the passing game. One of the reasons that they may not have thrown to him more is because he was part of a really, really good offensive front that was blocking for a great running game too. So, I mean, he was a huge part of everything they did offensively. And I think when you have a tight end that is a co-district MVP, which an award he shared with Cutter Wilson, it tells you the type of impact that he's having. And
how often do you see that?
No, not very often.
You don't see that.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to see what he does. He got a late offer from Minnesota and took it. It's going to be really fun to see what he does in the Big Ten.
All right, now let's go to the big boys. We're going to jump into the trenches. And in the case of our first team offensive line, Dan, we've got a beef squad up front. These guys are big. We'll start with Class 6A, Abilene High. We got Zach Killam from the Eagles 6'2", 260. Had a great year, blocked at 95%.
Yeah, a great year for Zach Killam. He was part of a really good Eagles offensive line. They averaged over 400 yards per game, over 6 yards per play, and ran the ball really well all season long. He was a first-team all-district pick with that 95% blocking grade, as well with 30 pancakes and no sacks allowed. But he was kind of a leader of what was a very sound offensive line for that Abilene High team this year, and well-deserving that honor.
All right, now we're going to go over to Stephenville, where Logan Davis has earned a first-team spot on our offensive line, 6'5", 325, a big boy, 92% up front blocking efficiency.
Yeah, and one thing you'll notice as we go down this list is there's kind of a trend that is emerging, is that all of these guys were part of excellent offensive lines. We're kind of leaders of excellent offensive lines. We mentioned Killam with that Abilene High group. Same case here with Logan Davis in a very good Stephenville offensive front. This was a group that across the board had a bunch of really, really good standout players. You're going to see several of these names if you do check out the entire team at the site. But in Logan Davis's case, graded out at 92%, as you mentioned, and he had a remarkable 75 pancakes on his way to earning offensive line MVP honors out of District 5-4A D1, which may have been the toughest 4A Division I district in the state. So this is a kid that showed up big for them all year against some really good opponents, and he's another one that I think has the ability to play at a higher level, certainly.
If you get 75 pancakes against the schedule that Stephenville played this year, you're doing some serious blocking.
Yeah,
because they played a murderer's row this year. They really did. Of course, they do every year.
Yeah, definitely. And then moving down the list, we got a couple of guys from the 3A D1 level. We've got Brock's Landon Searley. We've got Jim Ned's Connor Fitzgerald. Another two more big, strong kids that had great seasons for their respective teams.
Yeah, and both of them are, blocking at a high percentage against great schedules as well, because nobody wanted to play Brock or Jim Ned this year. So they were stuck with some, just monstrous non-district schedules, and then they have a deep playoff run, both of them against great competition. Searley blocked at 98% with 75 pancakes, and against that schedule, that's pretty gnarly. And then Fitzgerald blocked at 99% with 72 pancakes. So both these guys definitely, it was almost no-brainers to put them on first team. Very easy picks.
Yeah, and I think the last member of our first team offensive line was the same way. You've got DJ Powell from Brady, 6'6", 255, huge kid, two-way standout. He was actually the defensive MVP of his league from his spot on the defensive line. But offensively, when you look at what he did, it's hard to look past these numbers. 98% blocking grade, 80 pancakes, a really good player for what turned out to be a good Brady team that made a nice deep run.
All right. You and I both, I think, have an affinity for players that can play multiple roles or do multiple things. Just an athlete that you can kind of just plug in and play. And we give a lot of utility spots to our ball clubs, and our all big country preps teams generally have quite a few utilities. We celebrate those kids here. Our first team utilities on offense, Tyler Moody from Brock, who landed in the quarterback position there this year. Judd Beard from Eastland, whose name appeared quite a few times in our All Big Country Preps Player of the Week. That kid I mean, he's one of these kids that can do anything you put him out there to do. And then Cedric Ware of Westbrook, state champion Westbrook at the 6-man level.
Yeah, and I kind of look at the utility positions in a couple of different ways. One, I like to get those kids on there who truly are Swiss Army knife type players, and that's what Judd Beard was. And I also like it as an opportunity to get some kids on there that could step into different positions if you needed them to, or that have numbers that put them in those, that kind of conversation. But when you look at Moody stepping into that quarterback position, threw for over 3,000 yards in a new Brock offense, threw for over 45 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions. Really impressive to do that given the circumstances. They go from a run heavy offense to more of a spread based offense where you are kind of throwing the ball more, and he handled it well. I mean, he's a guy that you could put anywhere on the field and he'd do a good job. Also ran for a bunch of yards as well. So a very good athlete. And then Beard, I mean, you touched on it, a guy that rushed for 700 yards, 772 yards, 9 touchdowns, received for 648 yards, and 8 more scores. Really one of the best players that not a lot of people talked about this year. Judd Beard was a very good player for Eastland. And then Ware may have been the best 6-man player in the state this year. He had a monster performance in that state championship game where he had a lot of people talking about him as well. So these are 3 great players, and I think 3 great additions to that offense on the first team All Big Country Preps team.
Now we're going to go to place kicker, and it was this was a good year for place kickers in the Big Country. We had a lot of good ones. Our first team pick was Corbin Poston from Stephenville, and believe you me, he had a lot of competition to take this spot, but he earned it.
Yeah, he did. And I mean, you look at his numbers, and they're really kind of crazy. I mean, this does not happen at the high school level very often. He was 80 of 81 on point after tries, and they kicked a lot because Stephenville's offense was very good. And he made 13 of 15 field goals with a long of 46 yards. So this was a high school kicker that could help you win games. And he did that multiple times this year. He was not a guy that you had to hide. He was not a guy that you kind of crossed your fingers and hoped you didn't have to send out there. He was a guy that you were happy and confident to send out there when you needed 3 points, and he got them for Stephenville. So a huge year for Corbin Poston, who is also a great linebacker. I mean, just a really good player and a really good athlete as well.
All right, now we're going to jump over to the defensive side. We'll start with the defensive guys up front, the linemen. Again, we have a great offensive line. There's a lot of very great athletes on the defensive side in the Big Country as well. Gavin Sharp from Stephenville, a 6'3", 325-pounder, was the first guy that came up on the list.
Yeah, I mean, he's a kid that was the leader of a really good defensive line for Stephenville. And if you look at what they did defensively, I think that was really the key, kind of the unsung key to their run to the state championship. That the improvement they made defensively was just enormous, and that defensive front was a huge reason for it. And Gavin Sharp played a massive role in that with 59 total tackles, 6 tackles for loss, a couple of sacks, a couple of hurries. And really the big thing he did was he occupied, multiple blocks on most plays and allowed those guys behind him to make plays. So a huge year for Gavin Sharp, who was the defensive line MVP of his district.
Caden Matthews of Brock is our next defensive lineman to be honored on the first team. This guy was the most disruptive defensive lineman that I saw in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at those sack numbers. He had 22 tackles for loss, 17 sacks, a guy that lived in opponents' backfields. And I think you're right. He's a guy that teams had to scheme around, because if you didn't, he was going to be making plays in your backfield all day long. A great player, and probably one of the state's real underrated defensive linemen. If he were just a little bit bigger, I think he'd have, D1s knocking down their door to get to him. But as it is, I think he deserves an opportunity. I hope he gets it.
All right, Gage Stanlin from Jim Ned is our next defensive lineman on first team, a 6'4", 250-pounder. And the good news for Jim Ned is they got another year with this guy.
Yeah, and he's one that could have been a pick on the offensive line as well. He's a really good two-way lineman, but we picked him for defensive purposes on that first team. 59 total tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 18 hurries, and a forced fumble. He was another guy that was super disruptive, a guy that you really had to account for, and if you didn't, he'd make you pay.
All right, another guy that's going to be back next year up front, a little on the smallest side, but still a disruptor, no less. And at the Class 2A D1 level, just an absolute force. Kyle Nichols of Holly earns a first team spot.
Yeah, and that Holly defense was unbelievable. I think they had a stretch where they had 5 straight shutouts at one point, which tells you kind of the level of play they were playing. But the thing that's kind of neat about that Holly defense is even for that level, they've got a small defensive line. They do not have big guys up front, but they have guys who are quick and guys who can make plays. And Nichols kind of personified that. He had 110 tackles, which from a defensive line position is an enormous number. And then 32 tackles for loss, 13 sacks, 4 fumble recoveries. So he was a big time catalyst for that defense. And I think Holly needed representation on the defense, given what they did this year. And he's a great representative.
All right, moving on to our linebackers. And again, we've got a bunch of good ones. We'll start with Jacob Diax of Cooper, a 6', 200-pound senior.
Yeah, another great play. This linebacker group is one of the best that the Big Country's produced in a long time, in my opinion. You got 4 really, really good players, and DX definitely fits that mold. Had over 125 tackles this year. Was a first-team 3.5A D1 pick at that inside linebacker position with 24 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and 2 interceptions. So he's one that's been doing it for multiple years now for Cooper. He's finally a senior. He's another one that's looking for some college opportunities, and I hope he gets it because he's a great football player.
Okay, our next linebacker, Braxton Pearson out of Big Spring, a 6', 220-pounder. Over the years, Big Spring has been known more as an offensive type football team, but some kids out there do play some defense, and Pearson's one of them.
Yeah, and this defense I thought was pretty dramatically improved over some of the past models, and he was a big reason for that. 122 tackles, was the defensive MVP in his district. And among those numbers, 22 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 hurries, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, an interception, and a blocked field goal. So a guy that did a little bit of everything for them, a big kid who at times in the past had slid down to defensive end and done some pass rushing as well. So this year more linebacker, just a really good player that was one that teams I think had to be ready and scheme for, because he was a playmaker from sideline to sideline.
All right. Next on the list of our linebackers, Dawson Hearn of Cisco, a 6'4", 215-pounder. Just one of the area's best all-around athletes. He was a quality tight end, a quality linebacker, good size at 215, and piled up a bunch of tackles for the Lobos.
Yeah, I mean, you had a bunch of tackles, over 150 of them, 4 for loss, a sack, 4 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions. So another guy that was really a playmaker. I mean, he did what they asked him to do in that defensive scheme extremely well, cleaned up a lot of plays. And a big kid at 6'4", 215, you did not want to see him running at you as an offensive player, particularly if you're a smaller back, but a guy that can definitely play and one that really fits in well with this particular group of linebackers.
All right. Now we are running a 4-4-3 alignment with our first team Big Country defense. We often change the alignments depending on personnel that we have on our teams. It's a 4-4-3. So we got 4 linebackers on first team. And our last linebacker that we wanted to mention had one of the most dominating seasons I have ever seen out of a backer. Reese Young of Stephenville, a 6'2", 220-pounder. Kind of reminds me of the old Texas Tech standout Zach Thomas. Kind of a fire plug type guy. Very tough, very athletic. Man, that's one of the best seasons I've ever seen a linebacker have.
Yeah, and one thing that often happens when you see a kid with that many tackles is you kind of wonder what's getting counted as a tackle. But the thing about Reese Young is I saw him 3 times. I know you saw him maybe 3 or 4 times this year. Every time you watch him, he just jumps off the page. Like your eyes are directed directly to him when he's on defense, because he is in on so many plays. But finished with 256 tackles, 149 of those solos to earn MVP honors out of his district. Those numbers are crazy. And then among those 29 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 29 hurries, 6 forced fumbles, 4 fumble recoveries. This kid is a monster, and he is one of the most under-recruited players in the state, in my opinion. Any school that gives this kid a chance is going to get a football player. And
they're gonna love him. They're gonna love him.
Yeah.
But you think about that: 149 tackles that are solos. That's more tackles than most people get with assists. Just straight tackles. These are solos. 149. That's astonishing.
And when you watch him play a bunch of these, are bone crunching hits. He is a hitter. Like he's so much fun to watch, because he play after play where he's coming in, and he is not a fun guy. If you're an offensive player, he's not a fun guy to play against, because he's going to clobber you, and he'll do it all game long. But a super fun kid to watch, and one that is absolutely deserving of this. He's one of the best linebackers we've had in the area since I've been covering this
ever. Yeah, absolutely. All right, now we're going to jump into the secondary, and again, we're running a 4-4-3 alignment in our first team. So we got three defensive backs. Our first one is Trey Burkeen of Cisco, 6', 200-pounder.
Yeah, and this is a big kid for a cover guy, but he's a really good cover guy in the secondary there for Cisco. In addition to his 95 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, a fumble recovery. He also picked off 8 passes this year. Just a kid that was you didn't want to throw in his direction because it ended up there was a good chance it was going to end up going the other way. A really good player and just a junior, so we're going to get to watch him next year as well.
All right, Braxton Smith of Coleman and that awesome Coleman defense. He was one of the key performers in another. I'm just a great year for Coleman this year, finishing 11-1, and defense kind of led the way, and he was one of the leaders.
Yeah, and Braxton's a little different. He's not a huge kid, only 5'8", 140, but a fantastic athlete. He shows that on offense where he's a big play receiver, and then on defense, he is a shutdown cornerback. You talk about 8 interceptions, 9 pass breakups, and he returned 4 of those interceptions for touchdowns. So if you throw in his direction, you're doing it at your own risk. He's a really, really good athlete, and we're getting him back next year as well because he's just a junior. So as good as Coleman was this year, they may be even better next year, which is a pretty crazy thought.
All right, our final secondary player in our first team is Caden Morgan of Forsan. It's always nice to have that final line of defense as a run stopper in the secondary, and Caden Morgan, nobody was better than he in gathering tackles. A lot of people say it's a bad sign if you have a safety or defensive back that gets a lot of tackles, but that wasn't the case in Forsan. I mean, that was a quality defense. He was just so active and so quick that he was able to get to the point of attack and still get a lot of tackles for a good defense.
Yeah, and it's really been that way for 4 years. He was their leading tackler every year he was there, and was doing what you're saying. A lot of times it was that he was the guy coming in and making plays at or near the line, just because has such good instincts and is such a sound tackler. But this year, you talk about his tackles, 182 tackles from his safety spot, including 63 solos. To earn first team all district picks. And among those, you had 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and 3 interceptions to go with that as well. So this was a guy that was really a playmaker in that secondary for Forsan, and a quality receiver as well. So a really good athlete for 4 years, been a really fun kid to watch. And I'm just excited to see what he does with the rest of his life as well. He's a very good kid.
All right, now we're going to jump over to the utility spots on defense. And again, we have 3 of those. We'll start with Casey Shields of Holly. One of the most talented all around athletes in the big country. There was nothing this guy couldn't do.
No, I mean, when you talk about versatility, I mean, Casey Shields really personifies that quality. A kid that really plays all over the field at receiver, defensive back. He's their kicker, their punter, their returner. I mean, he does everything. He never leaves the field for Holly, and he's good at everything he does. But we do have him on defense, so we'll talk about those stats. But in addition to receiving for 700 yards, he had 68 tackles, 57 of those solos, 7 picks. Just a really good playmaker that was very well conditioned because, like I said, I mean, he was there in the game for every snap and was making plays in every phase of the game.
All right, Trey Beam of Early was a key element, both offensively and defensively for this upstart Longhorns team that had a great year this year. But he lands a spot on our roster on the defensive side as a utility man, and he was the co-utility player of the year in District 3 381.
Yeah, I mean, a kid that was a huge part of Early success this year, had over 1,350 rushing yards in addition to 14 touchdowns. So he was playing more in the offensive backfield this year, which limited his time at linebacker compared to past years, but still made a huge impact on defense where he had 70 tackles, 23 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 2 defensive touchdowns on fumble returns. So a kid that made the most of his time on the defensive side of the football, and really, I mean, he's one that could have made our team on either side of the football. Just a really, really good football player, and a kid that I know that Early will miss with his graduation.
I like kids who can not only tackle but force turnovers. When you have a guy that's out there that can force turnovers and make stops consistently, that's a valuable asset to your defense, and that's why I like this kid from Jayton, our final utility player for 2021 on the first team. Caden Valerio from Jayton earns that spot. And he's only a junior. He's coming back.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a huge kid at 5'9", 175, particularly for a defensive end. But at that Class 1A level, he is a super disruptive force. You mentioned the turnovers, 5 forced fumbles, 5 fumble recoveries. So a kid that was frequently, pulling the ball away from guys and recovering fumbles. Just a really good player, and he's going to be part of what was a good Jayton defense this year that could be good again next year. So it's going to be fun to watch him and see what he does with his senior season.
And we're not going to neglect the kicking game. We've got a punter on our defensive team as well. And this year it is Grayson Bearden, our first team punter, a senior from Wiley.
Yeah, also a fantastic kicker for Wiley, a kid who had a 55-yard field goal to his credit this year. But he's on our team, our first team as a punter, where he averaged 44.6 yards per punt. He was the special teams player of the year out of District 35A D2. A kid that handled basically all of their kicking duties and was really, really good in all of them, but has a huge leg. He's another one that I think is hoping for an opportunity to play at the college level, and I think some of those will emerge. But the one thing interesting about him is that 55-yard field goal, he kicks off the ground. He does not use a tee. He's just got that big a leg. So it's going to be fun to see what he does in the future as well.
Yeah, so do I. I just kick straight off the ground.
Yeah.
Barefooted.
Sideways.
Barefooted.
Yep. Spin a spiral line drive. I've seen him. I know.
Laces out. Remember, laces out and barefoot.
But what a team, man. What a team. When you look at that collection of talent, it's pretty awesome. We always talk about when we do these teams, when we put them together, how much fun it would be to watch this team take the field. Yeah. How much fun would it be to see this collection of talent on the same field?
Yeah, that would be something to see. And that goes for our basketball teams, our baseball team, our softball team. I'd love to see them play together. That'd be fun to watch.
And what's interesting when you look at our football team in particular, I'm looking at our second team, our third team, even that Rising Stars team. All of these would be really good football teams just stand alone. And you put all that talent together. It's pretty incredible the amount of talent we had in the big country most years, but particularly this year. There was a whole lot of talent, and I'm glad we were able to honor as many of those as we are. And I think we'd be remiss if we did not thank the coaches for their role in this. We had just an enormous number of nominations this year. If you look at our ballot, it is I think 35 pages long, just with kids that we were sorting through.
We had over 300 names listed on our All Big Country Preps teams totally, when you include the Rising Star team, honorable mention, True Grit, first, second, third team rosters. We honored more than 300 kids from the Big Country area this year. I'm very proud of that. And I must thank area coaches for their cooperation, their help. Without them, without you guys helping us to piece these teams together, we cannot do it. The coaches deserve a lot of credit for passing on the information that we needed and helping us to piece this thing together. We're very proud of it.
Yeah. And I think you and I would both agree it's an enormous amount of work, but it's a labor of love. We really do enjoy putting this together. And the thing I like about it is when we have that many nominations, it tells you that the coaches are cooperating at a super high level, and they care. They want to see their kids on these teams. And we really appreciate the cooperation they do give to give us these nominations and allow us to put these things together. So just, I think another success, very proud of these teams. And I was glad we were able to put them together and let folks read them. It's always a fun time of year this is kind of puts the bow on our football season. And now it's time for basketball.
Well, it's not quite time for basketball, not just yet, because we've got our superlatives to list right now. We've got our area MVP, we've got our offensive MVP, our defensive MVP, coach of the year, and utility player of the year, newcomers of the year, offensively and defensively. And we're going to announce those here very shortly. But first, we need to thank our sponsors. First and foremost, Capital Farm Credit, who brings you these Wednesday night podcasts throughout the school year, each and every Wednesday night. Also, for the love of the game broadcasting, our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of KLAX 93.5 FM out of Breckenridge, 97.7 FM KATX out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, 94.7 FM KWKQ out of Graham, KROO 1430 AM out of Breck, and KWVY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is for the love of the game broadcasting. Also, Rob Durham, sales consultant of Bears Chevrolet Buick Cadillac up in Breckenridge. If you're in the market for a vehicle, new or used, give Rob a shout. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. Reach him at 254-559-2266. That's Rob Durham up at Bears Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge. And finally, Phil Hill of the Abilene Realtors Group, big supporter of local athletics. If you're in the market, give him a shout at 325-669-5153 or visit his website at philhillproperties.com. And with that, Dan, it is time to mention the creme de la creme, the best players in the area for 2021 as we saw them. You want to jump in? You want to go with our all around MVP?
Sure. I'll start with it.
Take it away.
Our player of the year was a kid that we've already talked about. He was one of our first team running backs, but also an excellent linebacker and just a great all around football player. And that's Jim Ned's Xavier Wishart, the kid who has been doing it for years now. Just a great athlete, a really good football player. Had a great season, and kind of we saw him as that two-way standout. It's hard to overlook what he did for a team that won its first 12 games this season in trying to defend a state championship. A huge season for Xavier in earning that Player of the Year honor.
No, he had 2,500. He had 2,500 yards rushing, but he did it in 13 games. That's important to remember. There's some guys that had more rushing numbers than him. There's some guys that had more tackles than him. But you're talking about a guy that didn't just always specialize in one thing. He did it both ways. He was a great linebacker. He's a great running back. Although they did spell him a bit as a linebacker, but he still turned out to be a great linebacker. If he specialized just at one position and had 16 games to play, his numbers would be staggering at anything that he really did.
Yeah, no question. And our offensive MVP is one who could have been Player of the Year. He played a little bit of defense when they needed him to, particularly in the playoffs, but an enormous offensive season, and that's kind of where we slated him. Coy Aiken, receiver of Stephenville, one of the best receiving seasons I've ever seen from a high school kid. Like we mentioned, over 2,000 receiving yards, over 30 touchdowns, just a fantastic final high school season for Coy.
Quite possibly the best athlete overall in the big country. I mean, you could definitely make that argument. Primarily a receiver, so he takes our offensive MVP. But he did play some defensive back and made one of the most remarkable plays I've ever seen in a state championship game when shortly after a pick from an Austin LBJ player, he forced a fumble and batted the football right into the hands of a teammate, resulting in a touchdown. And he also had a one-handed grab for a touchdown that night. He scored 4 times. He had one of the most remarkable games in a state championship game I've ever seen from anybody. And, just what a year. The fact that right now, the only Washington State, I guess the only major school that's after him is flabbergasting to me.
But I was really happy, honestly, that he was able to do what he did in the state championship game, because it basically showed the entire state what we've been seeing all year long. You and I have both seen him multiple times this year. We knew what type of player he was. That happened, and it was kind of his coming out party for a lot of people who had not seen him play. So that was really cool. And off that, he got 5 Division I offers. He got offers from Western Kentucky, Sam Houston State, Texas State, North Texas, and as you mentioned, Washington State. So people were noticing, and people saw the performance he did, saw the type of football player he is. And it's really cool when those types of things happen with kids that you and I watch. And we know some of these kids are capable of playing at that level. I'm glad that some other folks noticed, and it was really cool. He was able to finish the season the way he was.
All right. Defensive MVP. I mean, as difficult a year as it was to pick our teams, this was the easiest one of our superlatives to pick. It was just an absolute no-brainer. Reese Young from Stephenville, linebacker, defensive MVP, with the most astonishing year I've seen out of a linebacker since I've been covering high school football, with 242 tackles and more than 140 solo stops. That's just unbelievable.
Yeah, no question. We talked about him as well on our first team. I mean, anytime you're ranging into 250 tackle territory, that's crazy. You're talking about, almost the high school equivalent of a Mike Singletary type linebacker. I mean, it's pretty nuts when you start thinking about some of those numbers, but that's the type of player that Reese Young was for the Stephenville team. He was a huge reason for their defensive success. And I could not be more pleased to have him as that defensive MVP. He earned it. He's just a really hard worker, dude who plays with an extremely high motor. I'm not sure we've ever had a more deserving player of an honor than he is of that defensive MVP award.
All right. Now here at Big Country Preps, we honor special teams players. We don't ignore special teams. We've got a special teams player of the year. There were a lot of players that were up for that spot, and Kason O'Shields from Holly is the man. And he did a lot more than just special teams. We'll get into that, but on special teams, he had more than 700 yards receiving, and he scored on returns, I should say, more than 700 return yards and 4 scores. He averaged more than 40 yards a punt. He had 59 of 69 PATs. He was 3 of 5 on field goals with a long of 49. He was just that guy that you could put anywhere out there on special teams. He was going to do the job.
Yeah, that's what's crazy. We mentioned Grayson Bearding being a punter kicker combo. This kid was not only that, he also returned kicks and did it at an extremely high level. So any special team you had, he was involved in a major way and helped that team to its first state championship game in the process. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's just no question a huge player, also a great receiver, also a great defensive back. But when you look at what he did on special teams, it really stands out above everyone else. He's the very deserving of that award.
And well, he caught 50 passes for 722 yards. He had 68 tackles. He had 7 picks. Other than that, he didn't do a whole lot, right?
Yeah, yeah. He was a major part of that success. And when you look at what Hawley did this year, I mean, we'll talk about Coach of the Year a little later, but it's Mitch Abels was certainly in that conversation. You look at what Hawley did in leading them to their first state championship game. A great season for Hawley and a great season for O'Shields, who was a big part of that.
All right, our offensive newcomer of the year, Jaden Jackson of Coleman, and it would have been a year. I mean, with as much attention as that Coleman defense was getting, it was kind of it was one of those years where if you were an offensive newcomer, you kind of just going to fly under the radar no matter how good you were almost. Jaden had a great year though. A lot of it was a legitimate dual threat, and they've got him for 2 more seasons.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. Just a sophomore, but he passed for over 900 yards, rushed for over 900 yards, and accounted for quite a few touchdowns, 28 total touchdowns. So a kid that was a really big player for that offense, and they've got a lot of really good backs. So a lot of his time spent handing off to those guys, but he's a catalyst. I mean, you look at what he did on both throwing and running the ball. He's a big part of what they did offensively. I think that I was impressed with him was that they lost a pretty good quarterback. Corbin Rosales had kind of led them through that rebuild, got them back to they qualified for a playoff spot, or would have had they been able to finish the season last year. And unfortunately, COVID wiped out their opportunity to play for the playoffs. So there was maybe some question as to who would replace him at quarterback. And Jaden Jackson stepped in there and did a tremendous job as just a sophomore, but a great athlete. He's going to be a ton of fun to watch the next 2 years.
All right, now we're going to go with our defensive newcomer of the year, Ivan McCann of Roscoe. And this kid, Dan, as a freshman, is already getting 79 tackles. He's already 5'11" and 200 pounds. He's already forcing turnovers.
Yeah,
I can see it already. I can see it right now. By the time he's a senior, Ivan the Terrible will be the nickname.
Yeah, you might be right. But I saw this kid when we make our rounds to do mug shots before the season starts in the preseason. I saw this kid. I had to do a double take. You're like, that kid's a freshman. I mean, he's built like a senior as a freshman, already 200 pounds at 5'11". And then I got to see him in the Santo game in the playoffs. A really good football player. You mentioned all those tackles. He also rushed for 421 yards and also received for 514 yards. In accounted, I think, for 11 touchdowns. But when you talk about what he did just defensively, because he is our defensive newcomer of the year, in addition to those tackles, picked off 2 passes, broke up 7, 4 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries, just did a little bit of everything for them defensively. But he's one that if you're a Roscoe fan, you're excited about his potential on both sides of the football. He's a guy that's going to be making a whole lot of plays over the next 3 years.
Rushed for 421, caught 41 passes, 514 yards and 5 scores. There's nothing he can't do. And he was only a 9th grader. There's no telling how good this kid's going to be in 4 years. There's no telling.
As a freshman,
yeah,
he's already a bruiser. Dude's huge. He's going to be this kid's going to be scary.
He's going to be a beast, man. He's going to be a beast by the time he's senior.
Jake Freeman's excited about his future.
Yeah. Time for our coach of the year. And there were a lot of guys up for this because we had 6 teams make it to Arlington this year. So there was a lot, and we had a lot of teams that really took a major step forward that didn't make it to Arlington, but you had to consider all these guys, but we went with Sterling Doty of Stephenville after they took the Class 4A Division I state championship. And there were a lot of very worthy coaches out there to take this, but we think that Sterling earned it.
Yeah, I mean, no question. We had a ton of coaches that put themselves in that conversation. We mentioned Coach Abels out of Holly, Jake Freeman at Roscoe. I mean, he oversaw a huge turnaround. And then you had Coach Mathis from Brock at State as well. And then some
Yes.
6-man coaches that did some really impressive things. But it's hard to argue with perfection. And Sterling Doty's Yellow Jackets were perfect this year against probably one of the toughest Class 4A D1 or that equivalent schedules in Texas high school football history. They played everybody. You look at all of the challengers they played to win that state championship. They played just about every team you would need to beat to do that. I mean, it's remarkable the schedule they played, starting with that district in 5-4 AD1 where you had Waco, La Vega, and Midlothian Heritage, and then you go through their playoff run where they're beating Argyle, they're beating Melissa, they're beating obviously to win that Austin LBJ. The list goes on and on. Just a really, really tough schedule, and they took on all comers and they beat them all. Just a crazy strong season for Coach Doty, and really impressive. He did a fantastic job with that group.
They walked a tightrope all the way to Arlington too. I mean, they had that they beat Arlington, or they beat Argyle by 1 score. They beat Melissa by 1 score. They beat Wichita Falls Hershey by 1 score. One extra mistake along the way could have ended it all, but they made the plays when they had to, and you have to credit coaching along the way. That was a brutal schedule that they faced, and they always found a way to win.
Yeah, and here's the thing I think that speaks to as well, which I think speaks directly to Coach Doty, is it speaks to a culture and it speaks to a belief. I think he instilled a culture and a belief in his players that when things got tough, they were going to find a way to pull out. And this was a really mentally tough football team. You talk about playing 3 straight 1-score games in deep into the playoffs. To be able to win all of those against really good football teams tells you just kind of that level of mental toughness that they're putting on the field every single week. So this Stephenville season was one for the ages. Honestly, I think it's hard to do much better than they did this season, going 16-0, winning a state championship. And their program's not going anywhere either. He's going to have a lot of good players back. It's going to be fun to see what he does in the coming years.
First unbeaten season for Stephenville since 1999, when Art Briles was in his final year there. 22 seasons rather, since they've done that. First 16-0, and the best defense that they've fielded in 12 years.
Yeah, I mean, this is one for the books. I mean, this season stacks up with any season any big country teams ever had, and just in terms of everything that was accomplished. So I think you gotta respect the architect of that team. You've got to respect the job that he did in getting them to the finish line and through it. So pretty awesome season for Stephenville, and Coach Doty's an awesome guy. So it's cool to see him honored that way.
And with that, it's just about time to wrap up our Capital Farm Credit Wednesday Night podcast. But before we do that, we want to remind you that we've got 3 separate subscription packages here at bigcountrypreps.com. We've got a monthly for $5 a month. We've got a semi-annual 6-month subscription where we knock that price down to $4 a month. And we've got an annual 12-month subscription where we knock that price down to $3 a month, $36 for a full year of Big Country high school athletic coverage.
We'd also like to remind you that if you ever see a photo you like in any one of our galleries, those are available for purchase. You can purchase a digital download for just $7. We also have some prints and keepsakes available, so make sure you check those out. As you're scrolling through the site, you'll notice that we take a whole lot of photos from these games that we're at. It's something we really enjoy doing, and it's something we're very proud of here at bigcountrypreps.com.
All Big Country, all high school, all the time. Welcome home.